Alrighty, it is Friday, and what I'd like to do is continue our movement, our momentum that we've had on Project Zero, and continuing our bootstrap and our FTP uh, exploration. It was really cool to see that I think it was Julian who showed how to do FTP at the command line. That is awesome. It was like that was news to me, but once I saw it, it totally made sense. As that's the other way to do it. And that's the other thing is to keep in mind. FTP and Git. I was talking to another student about this, and if you're new to this Git idea and the FTP, in some sense, it can feel the same, right? Because with Git, we can move things to a remote repository, a server. With FTP, we move files from local to server. The big distinction there is, of course, with Git, we also are doing version controlling, version control on our code. We're staging it, we're placing it into committing it in so that if we ever needed to roll back, we could. And FTP is basically here's that file, move it to that server. And also the idea of files and folders in websites is becoming a little dated, but even at that, I suspect as you continue with whatever path you're on, you're going to see some of this way of websites being set up. But just know as you do it too, it's also changing to where it's not as the code itself, the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or whatever else they're using will handle these things as endpoints, and you'll hear these terms as routes, so that you don't have to have folders and files. But regardless, it is good to know and have an understanding, and it allows us to really step forward with this. So let me kind of show you what my thinking was for this week and how I got to the assignments that we're going to do. Okay. So I was looking at the lynda.com trainings, and as I was going through it, and I thought, you know what, where does he end up, right? And so he ends up with this wisdom medicine, wisdom pet medicine, this veterinary site. And so I went ahead and downloaded the whole thing and I looked at it, and then I pulled it up, and so I went to the last chapter and I said, okay, let me look at this. And so I did. I double clicked it. So I downloaded it. I looked at the chapter 9. I looked at this and I pulled it up in my browser. And so here is the site in the form that is left at the end of the lecture for Bootstrap. And I'm like thinking about this, and I'm like, could this be then used as a starting off point for Project Zero? And I thought, yeah, it could be, but there are better examples of templates that, and I wouldn't call that a template, although it is kind of a way, it's a starting point, right? So I'm like, how do we give you a starting point? And here's what you can know based on what I'm going with this. Even though I'm going to make you go find a template, you don't have to use it for Project Zero, but you might want to, okay? If you choose, you're going to do this work this week by going to find templates, and there'll be some good experience, I hope, in just looking at these templates and understanding some of the underlying technology in the code and other things. But if after you do this, which by the way, after you download, we're going to upload to the server. This template, now it will not replace your standard index file, but it will be a folder. I'll show you that. So even after you do this, because the thing I'm going to do is I found one I like. I'm going to download it. I'm going to build a page or two, okay, after I download it, but I'm going to show you the requirements of what you have to do. But I'm going to do that in the intent of showing you kind of the thinking of like, okay, now that we have some structure, how do you actually start building in this content for Project Zero? Okay, so that's where we're heading. So again, I looked at this and I was like, yeah, this actually provides a lot of what we would need a starting off point to do that. But then it was like, okay, let's start searching. Free Bootstrap templates, free Bootstrap template themes. You can do it either search. There's a lot of keywords out there you can use for this. Definitely probably want to find a current one if possible. And there were a couple of websites. This one kept popping up again and again, so I was like looking at it, and I'm like, okay, let's look at what they have. And as I was looking at everything, and I was like, okay, one page. So this one page idea is very popular. It's not what I want you to use for Project Zero, just because part of Project Zero is for you to learn how to manage different files. It is in a sense just a file management content, placing content in and managing files and linking it all together. And knowing how to use that is an important part of this exercise, but also know that a lot of what you may see is this one page, single page application is what we refer to as, right? So find one that really does support, right, the menu and the different files. But also find one that you feel like, oh yeah, that's kind of my style. That's what I'm looking for, right? So as I did, I came upon the clean blog one. I thought this was a nice one. So I clicked on it. And when you click on these things, you have to start reading about, right, what it's fully responsive. Do you understand what that means? Modern design with colors, that's just the design itself. It works with PHP. It's like, so it works with PHP for form validation, right? Working PHP. So PHP is a server side. So in this case, part of what I want you to do with this, then the first thing we'll go over is the current topics, is start looking at these things and see, because in order for you to utilize something, you have to at least have a basic understanding of what it's doing. And and so don't feel bad in a sense that, some people may choose something that'll look more higher end. Some people won't, and that's okay because it's really based on where your level is. As far as, yeah, I understand that, I know I can modify it. And just because it says that, right? That's part of what you're going to do by downloading it. And look, you can also view it on GitHub, which is awesome, right? And then you also have to understand how it's licensed, right? How sorry, right here, how is licensed? What does it mean if it's Apache 2.0, right? Is that something that then I can use? And in general you can, because of the context we're using it in, but still I want you to do that as part of your research. So for the current topics, I want you to go through, find a template based on what you like, the way it looks, and then researching the template itself to see if you feel like it's something you could work with, okay? And what are the other things you would need to understand about the template in order to effectively utilize it? And that's where I was saying, like in this case, I would want to do a little more research if you didn't understand PHP, which by the way, that's server side, so it's like JavaScript runs on the client, PHP runs on the server, right? So, and there's similar templates, right? There's other websites you can search for. So first of it is finding one that you think looks nice. Now, part of the reason I like this was because I like the menu option. I like the hero unit, and this is the background here. I'm like, yeah, this kind of looks like it, right? And that's the other thing is like, what does this mean, Jekyll, right? So you have to research that and at least understand it. So and this is a very key term or a very key concept on the web, is in order for you to utilize somebody else's template, code, whatever, you have to be willing to give it enough time to understand what they're doing, because jumping in without doing that will create frustration, okay? Okay, so that's the first part. So let me look at we're continuing the bootstrap concept. We're looking for in the current topics, and again, this is where I'd say do the current topics first, right? So I want you to, and I kind of was making a joke, call me maybe, right? So maybe, and actually it's not a joke because like I said before, you are not going to be required to use this template, but you may want to. You may find after doing this week and starting next week, you will either use your template or you'll go and use the final one at Ray's, or you'll do your own, whichever one. But starting next week, I want you to actually have the structure that you're going to be using to create Project Zero. Okay? So again, that was kind of my joke, but kind of not. So first, find the template you're going to use, reply giving us the link, and then do and talk about some of these things that I was talking about with the template that you've selected, right? So on mine, right? So I was kind of going over some of these. You would need to understand what that is, right? And by downloading it, and then in this case, I just downloaded it, I started looking at the code, right? So, but this is the link right here that you would provide into the discussion board for this, and then do the normal, right, writing about it and the replies for that. So I've already, let me just bring this up because I'm going to show you this. I've already downloaded into my downloads directory this Bootstrap clean blog and the version, right? So that's my zip file that I downloaded, and I unzipped it, and here's the directory, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to take, matter of fact, I'll just do this part with you. I'm going to copy that. And last week on my desktop, I had the 82 directory, and that's the stuff that we did. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to paste. And so when you're using, or when you're considering using something like a template, generally you make a copy of that, the standard. You make a copy of that local, you make a copy of that template and you place it somewhere, either on the server or somewhere, so that in case when you're changing something, you're like, hey, what did that look like before? Okay, so that's now, so in this case, we're starting to talk about what you'll need to do for the second part, right? So for the second part, I'm not sure why I keep doing it that way, but for the second part, I'm actually going to have you upload this, okay? So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually make a few changes to mine, right? But in your case, remember, I was talking about you don't have to, but for the hands-on, I want you to upload that template. So where I was showing before, and I will come back in a little bit and do this, you'll place this, whatever the name is, up in the HTTP docs directory on the server, and then you'll give us a link to this, right? And I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But before I do mine, I'm actually going to go through, I'm going to pause for a few seconds here, a little bit, and actually go through and modify that, just because I'm kind of curious. For me, is like because that's the idea, right? The idea is for you to look at the code in that thing to say, yeah, I believe I have enough understanding of Bootstrap. I have enough understanding in order to modify this particular template to use it the way I want. So I'm going to go do that for a little bit to kind of give you the thinking I want you to put into this. So hold on, and I'll be right back. Okay, so that was great. So what I did, and I'm about to show you, is I took that downloaded template that I had opened and created a folder. I copied it without modifying it over into that directory I had from last week, so that it is a subdirectory in there. I'll show you that in a minute. And then I went back to my downloaded place and I modified the site from there, so that if I could send, and in order to do, the reason I did that was so that I could figure out, did I have enough experience with that template and the way that template's set up to make basic changes. So let me first show you that, and then I'll show you how I put it in the directory, and then I'll upload it to show you that. Okay, so in my folder structure under my downloads, right? So under here, what I did is I just took that folder here, and that it had all the files that were from the standard, and these are actually the ones I've already modified, and I drug that folder right into my Sublime, and in doing that it opens up all the files, right? So then I started looking at the index file, right? So I said, okay, I'm going to read through the index file. I'm going to see if I can figure out, which is pretty clear, but okay, there was the navigation, right? Now this is the modified navigation. So what I did is I took from my, let me just pull it up real quick. I think I have it here, right here. I looked at this. What I had last week, like here's my categories, and here were 3 pages, but I first wanted to just see, could I go through and, based on my experience and of the template, my experience and combination of the template, could I just modify the template to reflect these categories off that main page? And really it's the index file that I'm modifying, and then on each page I then change the names to reflect what they were. So this is what I'm walking you through how I did. Okay, so I went to that index file, I found where that content was at, right? And I also looked at, it was index, and if you want to remember what it was before, as a matter of fact, I can show you what it was before I modified it. Because like I said, I put it in desktop. I went to my 85 folder. That's the way it looks. So it was about, contact, right? So let's just actually pull this up so we can look at it as well. So this is the way the original, not contact, let's go to the home. So this is the way the original file template output looks, right? So what I said is I'm going to go through and modify it. And here is what I did. I modified this content just to have this here. I modified each of these links, and I'll show you that in a minute. And if you click on them, right, that home of course goes to index. Markup then goes to a page where I just changed it so I could recognize that that was the markup page, also reflecting the file. Sample post in this case, I also haven't done this yet. I could probably show this is how I'd modify that. And contact, because notice here on the home was because I modified that menuing idea, that navigation idea up here, and I only did it here and I didn't do it on all of these subsequent pages because the idea was just to ask myself, could I make these modifications on this page? Okay, so now look, let me show you a little bit, and I just played around to see if it was easy, and it was very straightforward for me to do it. So I pulled up the index file, and where it had those other pages, I said markup. Now this just changes the actual reference. What I did is I went over and took the file and I did file, save as, okay? And then I created that, instead of contact, I wanted markup, right? So that's how I did it. I said I want markup.html. Okay, so that's just a matter of bringing up one of the subfiles and then changing it. So you can see that I did the same thing on hosting, right? But as you notice that I did that, so that's first part of it, just making it, seeing how easy, do I understand it enough to be able to do that with it, and then we can talk about more changes. But basically, in order to do Project Zero, you just need to be able to create pages and link them into the document, and then place content from the stuff you've already done into the page. Now I'm going to do some of that starting next week, okay? So I'm going to go back to this index, and I'm like, okay, so this is actually the page like I showed you before that is rendered, but because I changed it here and it's working here, so like when I click web dev, oh yeah, that page is not there. So actually let's fix that. So that's actually a good one. I didn't plan that, but that's perfect. So let me go back to my here. So I don't have a file called web dev, so I can pull maybe the contact or the about, right? So I could, again, the about is already there, so I could do file, save as, and I could say, okay, so I'm going to call this one web dev, right? I'm going to place it in that same directory. Cool. That's cool. No, I'm not going to purchase it now. So now what I've done is I've done a file save as, I've created a new file. So now on my index file, because I had already modified the HTML, remember this is only modifying the markup, this is actually creating that file. And now in that file I can go in here and I can go, okay, let's see, starting bootstrap is the button. Okay, I'm going to have to change the menu. I can do that in a second. About me, so I can say in this case this page is going to be about web development. Okay, cool. This is what I do. Right, that's cool. I like that. I'll keep that there, and then this would be content I could do later. So I'm going to go ahead and save, and by the way, if you hopefully know this about Sublime, you can tell when you modify something because it goes from a, well, let's actually do it so you can see it again. So if I'm modifying content, right, so up here, if you can see that, right, if I just hit save, it changes it to an X showing me I modified that. Okay, but now let me actually show you the output. So now, before, remember, I was on here and when I clicked web dev it didn't work, and now it does because I've created that page and I've linked to it. Now here's the other thing. Let's go ahead and do this so you can see this as well. And again, this I'm not gonna, you could actually upload this, but the idea is to leave the original template intact somewhere so you have it in case you ever need to refer back to. So now let's actually look at how I would take this very simple navigation menu and put it on some of these other other pages, right? It's like markup doesn't have it. So let's go back to here, go back to my index file, and I'm like, oh, okay, so it's just these LIs right here that I would need to grab. Copy that. Go into my, which one was it? Was it markup? Yeah, markup. That's my markup page. Go up higher. Is this the LIs I'd want to make sure, right? Because I've added an LI because I had one more. And again, I'm going to hit save. And then I'm going to come back to here and I'm going to refresh this page. And look, cool. So now it works. It's actually, so this is really about asking yourself, right, how comfortable you are, and this is the point of learning, of creating these different pages, changing the markup to reflect those different pages. And then, like I said, and now I'm going to do the last step where I upload that clean template that hasn't been changed up into my website, so I get the experience of doing the FTP as well. And now you're going to want to think, right? So I would definitely tell you to take the time, even though I'm not making you upload the changed directory. Take the time to know that template enough that you feel like you could actually do project 0, or at least your beginning of attempt at it, because that will tell you a lot about it. Okay. All right, so now I've started my CyberDuck. Right, so and actually I went ahead and did this so you wouldn't all have to wait, so let me just show you what I did. So I opened up my HTTP docs. I navigated in my window, right, to that 82 directory. Remember, where I was working before was in the downloads, and I might, if I do more work, promote this or copy this in to that desktop area, right? And again, this is where we could start thinking about Git would be really helpful once I have that, yes, I'm going to use that structure. But now there's that directory. So that is the original template in its original context, and that's the folder name. And so all I did is I grabbed that folder and I dropped it onto here. Now I could also, and it wouldn't be a bad idea, but I thought I could leave it the same, is that this long name right here, I now actually am going to have to reflect that in my URL. Okay, so that's actually let's actually do that now. So hang on, I got to do one thing, pull this over here just real quick for something. And now what I'm going to do is show you now how I put the link, how I create the link. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and paste in my server URL. This is that old directory, right? So now I have to navigate to that directory that I uploaded. It's really pretty simple, right? And actually I could just show you. I could actually keep it on here to show you how I'm going to do it because it's fairly straightforward. But this is a part of knowing how just to reference things on the web, right? So now I'm going to do boot. I'm going to say start. And this is where you kind of start thinking, yeah, that would have been better to change that name, but that's okay. Bootstrap. And actually I could copy it as well, but okay, I'm going to do this the long way. Clean blog dash 1.0.3. And so, okay, so this is great. So now I have to go, okay, what did I do wrong? Start. Ah, look at that. I can already see it. Can you see it, what I did? So when it says blog, it should have been a dash there. Okay. Enter. And if all works well, now I still have to go see. Index file. Oh, see? This is where copying and pasting would have been a really good idea. Perfect. Perfect, 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 right? So this is then that clean blog template that I found, I downloaded to my local directory, I placed into that 82 subdirectory from last week, I uploaded into my website, okay? I then took my standard URL reference to the server space that you have, and then I just added to it the name of the directory, right? So again, you could have done that by making the directory name a little shorter if you want, but it was a good exercise to do that. Notice I didn't have to type index.html, and that's because the server will automatically look for that index file, so that's great, okay? All right, so again, we're continuing this adventure on. So next week, and I already give you a preview of this, what I'm going to have done is that I think I like this template. I think it's going to work for me. right? But I could also go back and look, like I said, by next week you will need to have made a decision about if you're going to use your template or if you're going to use that one that was ended at the end of the Bootstrap series, right? So, and that's good because what you're learning in the Bootstrap lectures is really about how to modify, how to understand how that Bootstrap page comes together. And then next week I will actually have a page content that shows an example of what your content pages for Project Zero will look like. Okay, all right, so I hope you found this helpful. Again, reach out if you need, and I hope you have a wonderful week. I know I'm gonna.